This is the Sunday stream opening song because the other song is copyrighted. La 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 la. Oh look, here comes Dog Cat Fox.
Hi, Sky.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sunday stream. The stream I do on Sundays because Sunday is the day to stream on Sundays. Yes, good morning to you all. Hope you've had a good week so far and a good weekend as well. Here on this beautiful, overcast, slightly grimy-looking Sunday morning where I am. But hey, beggars can't be choosers, I suppose. How are all you doing? Hopefully well. And who are all you? All you peoples. All you people. Scientrology, Keeverdam, Brett-Eyed, Tiff Forex, Zalbla, Mike R, Arc210, Burgid, Malademna, Shane, Mike R. I already said Mike R. Oh, Mike R, you get it twice. What do you know? You like it twice? You get it twice. I'm so nice, I did it twice. Non-Vitae Rex, good morning to you all. Good morning to you. Good morning to you. We're all in our places with bright shining faces. Useless Cook, hello. So, first off, I want to ask you guys for a little bit of help. So, as many of you may know, I have had some microphone issues for quite a while now, where from time to time my microphone will just decide to jump the gain through the roof and try to reach out for any sound it can around it for no particular reason, and suddenly everything sounds like an aircraft carrier. I have made some adjustments based on some advice and some tips from people on Twitter and elsewise to try to remedy this. I will not know during the course of the show if it happens again. So if it does, please let me know in the chat, because I won't really have any indication since I don't have another person here to tell me. And if it does, I obviously have some more adjustments to try or seek out. So that is my request of you this morning, but also to join me on an odyssey of discovery, as perhaps we'll find out for the first time what happens when a DEI program goes sour. So, one of the things that I have heard many times in promotional videos or discussions about implementing diversity, equity, and inclusion programs into an organization is that one of the things that have to be kept in mind is that as goals are set and as new policies or culture changes are implemented, that there has to be accountability. What is accountability when it comes to a DEI initiative? What happens when someone either doesn't play by the same book or goes off the ranch or misbehaves? So far as I can recall, because I've asked it rhetorically many times, it's never been detailed exactly what happens to someone who doesn't go along with the program. What does that accountability look like? If a manager does not meet their diversity quota, which of course there are no quotas because that would be illegal probably, what happens to that person? Or if some grunt in the trenches doesn't get along to go along, what happens to that person? Maybe this video will tell us. I don't know. Because all I know is the title is Diversity Backlash. What to do when there's backlash for your diversity inclusion program. So we're going to find out from, I guess, a professional diversity consultant, some tips and tricks for what happens when your workforce or your customers, there was something mentioned in the description about customers, push back against your DEI efforts. So we'll get into that in a second. A couple more hellos before we begin. Mike Savage, Blarg, Spudgun, Simon Willikins, good morning to you all. All right, so with that as preamble, I'll start off with a few seconds for a sound test. You guys tell me if you can hear it. This clocks in at just under 18 minutes, so let's get going. I should be able to cover the whole thing in my usual hour and a half time period. Also, if you'll check out the top of the chat box before I forget, you'll see there a link provided by Keeverdam. Thank you, Keeverdam, for the GoFundMes for our friend Shady Grin, Angry Illinoisian, and his kitten. Their friends and loved ones could certainly use your help if you have a couple of bucks to spare. And Little Mo Zizlak, good morning. Here we go. Oh, FIG, Strategy and Consulting. Ooh, okay.
Hello, my name is Tishelle Lawson, and I'm the president of FIG Strategy and Consulting based in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Hi, Tisha. I'm Scribe.
FIG is a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy firm. And what that means is we help organizations develop meaningful diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, training, and most importantly, strategies.
Okay.
And today we want to talk to you about something that a lot of organizations, or at the very least leaders, are experiencing, and that's called diversity backlash.
Dun, dun, dun. She said the thing. Diversity backlash. Okay, what is diversity backlash or DEI initiative backlash? Interesting phrasing.
Now, because that's more of a formal term, I'm going to explain to you what that means. And if this applies to you, if one of any of these apply to you, we should probably talk.
Oh, all right. Well, fortunately, in my company, I've never had to deal with a DEI initiative program, etc., because we're a relatively small company and such issues have never really come up. But I do have friends and family who have gone through such things before, and they've told me some war stories. So what say you?
So what is diversity backlash?
Yes.
Diversity backlash is when your employees or possibly even your customers respond negatively to your diversity efforts.
Okay, well, you're going to have to then, of course, describe what a diversity effort looks like first, so I'll know what it is that they're pushing back against.
That could be the diversity trainings. That could be now starting to revamp your hiring practices or policies, rethinking language, being more inclusive in your messaging or advertising, and actually receiving pushback from primarily your employees.
Okay, well, is there any scenario in which such pushback is rational or reasonable? I mean, I guess I would need, what's our favorite term around here? An active example. Could I get one of those?
Things like, why do we have to do this? Or we were fine before. Or I don't want to do this. I'm tired of it. Blah, blah, blah. It's just, there's no buy-in. Okay,
well, why does there need to be buy-in? Right? I guess this all stems from the presumption that diversity, equity, inclusion is 100% necessary, full stop. But
so I'm going to tell you 3 very common reasons why this is happening.
Okay.
And hopefully a light bulb will go off and give you some ideas as to how to correct that.
Oh, let me guess. Number 1, your workforce is all racist, right?
So for starters, the most common is, we don't have a diversity issues. What are you talking about?
Okay. Is that always wrong?
Well, that is normally the mindset of someone who's in the majority.
Okay. It's not the mindset of someone who has been at the company and knows there's not really a problem as outlined by most diversity, equity, and inclusion consultants. It's just that, someone in the majority. Okay. What constitutes the majority?
Right. So typically going to be
are you going to say white male?
White hetero male.
White hetero male.
Possibly Christian.
Possibly Christian. Okay. Tell me more how all white hetero male Christians think. No one else could possibly have such an attitude, but the first and foremost suspect. Okay. All right. Go on.
Typical 4-year degree, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, okay. So white, hetero, male, Christian, 4-year degree. Wow. I mean, that's awfully specific. Okay. And all of those things, right? All of those things somehow invalidate the opinion that a diversity, equity, and inclusion program is unnecessary in any particular organization. Okay.
This is also very common amongst white women or women that are in the majority.
In the majority. You want to specify what you mean by in the majority? I'm backing up a bit.
Women or women that are in the majority, meaning whatever the group, the primary demographic or the primary group is for your company.
She used demographic and group in the same sense, but at least she used demographic and not just say group. I mean, it's half and half, but I'll take it.
Or possibly your community.
Uh-huh.
That group will not necessarily identify as having a diversity issue because they are in a majority.
Okay, then why specify race, gender, religion, etc.? If it's just the majority demographic could be anything, depending on where you're at, right? I mean, what if the person complaining about this is a black female? Does that make their either a claim, concern, or opinion more valid? Or if they're in the majority, it's less valid?
Meaning they don't experience things the way that most minorities do.
Uh-huh. Right. Okay. So again, if I see someone and I have some notion of their orientation, their religion, their education, then I can understand that their opinion is invalid versus someone else who looks different. Okay.
So that's pretty standard.
Okay, that's standard. That's standard. White people are pushing back, and they're doing it because they're white and they're in the majority. Or anyone in a majority of a demographic surrounding the situation is wrong if they say something like that. All right. So there's no situation where their opinion could have some basis in reality.
That's pretty standard, regardless of your industry, regardless of your company size, regardless of where it is your company is located.
Uh-huh.
That tends to be one of the more common issues.
Whoa! Wait! One of the more common issues? What? The people? What is the issue? The pushback, or the racial, gender, religion, education makeup of the person making the complaint? I mean, okay.
It's simply because it doesn't apply to me, and so how on earth can it exist?
No, that's not okay. Our company does not have a diversity problem. Okay, that is the statement of quote unquote pushback, right? All right. Now, either that opinion is based in fact, or it is based on, I don't know, nonsensicality. I don't even know if that's a word, but I made it up and it sounds good. But then, of course, you have to define what diversity means and what the goals are. And I'm pretty sure I know what you think diversity means, but I'd just be assuming from what you've just said about what the complainants are going to look like. So it's all just one big, okay. Let's see where she goes.
Well, first things first,
Uh-huh.
The way to address that is to acknowledge that simply because it's not happening to you does not mean it's not happening at all.
What is happening? No. Okay. Like I said, you've already messed things up here. Hello, I work for company X, and I'm going to introduce diversity program into company X because for whatever reason, I am doing so. And then employee A says, I don't think we have a diversity problem in this company. Right? Okay, so that person is either, and again, this is just accepting that the whole diversity thing in the first place is legitimate. That person's opinion is either informed or uninformed. Okay? It's either somewhat accurate or somewhat wrong because opinions can go either way. That it's not happening to them. What is not happening to them? They're in the company. They have an opinion on what is being assessed or accused of the company's diversity. What? This doesn't make any sense. You're not even 3 minutes in, and you're not making any sense.
That would be like saying, because you've never been cut off in traffic, that people don't get cut off in traffic, or because you've never experienced road rage, that people don't experience road rage.
What? Okay, so you're not talking about diversity. You're talking about racism, I think. But then, of course, you're the one that decided to immediately classify who the obvious complainants would be by their race and gender and so on. So diversity is an experience, or lack of diversity is an experience in and of itself? Is that what you're meaning to say? I guess that's what you're meaning to say.
We actually know that that's true. We have the numbers and the statistics to prove that.
Uh-huh.
So basically what you're doing is making sure that you're having these conversations with your majority groups and getting them to understand that this is not about isolating. This is also not about excluding them. This is, however, about creating an inclusive culture.
It's not about excluding them. No, it's just about assessing them first and foremost as wrong because of what they look like. That their opinion is obviously wrong because whatever they have to say about the nature of the company they work in is wrong because of what they look like, which isn't at all racist, which isn't at all exclusionary or discriminatory in and of itself. And you're not talking about a conversation here. There's no dialogue. A conversation would be something like, somebody says, I don't think our company has a diversity problem. And you say, okay, well, let's talk about that. That's at least the hinting of a conversation. There was nothing about, there's no dialogue being described here.
And in order to do that, we have to acknowledge the fact that some groups, right, even our coworkers, our employees, customers, are not necessarily experiencing the same things that we're experiencing.
Who's we? You're talking about not being exclusionary, but being inclusive, but you're already talking about in divisive language between whose experiences are valid and whose aren't, whose opinions are valid and whose aren't. Who is we? And who is they? I think I know. You're giving some heavy hints, and it's not boding well.
So it's not to diminish anyone's experience, thoughts, etc.
Yeah, of course it is. You just did it. You just did it. You just did it. Somebody pushes back, and you immediately classified them as probably this color, this gender, this religion, this education. And so obviously, because they're those things, their opinion is ill-informed and wrong. And so without even considering what the individual has to say, you've already brushed aside their perspective based on what they look like or what they are. You can't, no, you don't get to make that move. You have set the table and you've set the boundaries. You don't get to break them after the fact. No, I'm sorry.
But it is about acknowledging that simply because it's not your experience, that it doesn't make it a real experience.
What experience? Does this company have a diversity problem? Granted that you've defined what diversity is. The answer is either yes or no, depending on what the parameters are. And someone's opinion on that may be either correct or incorrect, regardless of what they look like, regardless of their education or what God they worship. Okay? We're not functioning rationally here so far.
Furthermore, majority groups are very rarely subject to backlash.
Really? Majority groups aren't rarely subject to backlash? You mean like having their opinions, thoughts, and perspectives diminished down to inconsequence because of what they look like? Oh, you're right. That never happens. That really never happens, does it? Oh, is the idea to sort of make up for that by doing those things to balance the scales?
Themselves, right?
Right.
Or stereotyping.
Oh, just stereotyping. Yeah. No, there's no stereotyping going on here. Are you kidding me? How do I find these things? I swear.
Or experiencing isolation, or being left out of a group, or excessive microaggressions. That's, again, not their experience.
You don't know what anyone else's experience is by looking at them. If you think that you do, well, there might be an ist or an ism that applies to your ideology. Okay? I don't know if you realize what you are doing here. I don't know if you realize just how contradictory you are at the outset of your presentation. It's not a good look.
And since that's typically not their experience, they genuinely do not believe that that's the experience of others. So it's hard for you to accept that I may be followed around a store because that's not your experience when you go into a store. It may be hard for you to accept that someone might treat a transgender person differently because that's not your experience.
Differently how? What are you talking about? But okay, so all people who look like you are followed around in stores. All transgender people are treated differently, context absent. Is this what I am to assume every time I walk down the street and see someone who looks like you, that you're a victim, that you're targeted, that you need help and assistance and protection just because of what you look like? And conversely, do you look at everybody who looks like me and assess me as being never having anything bad happen to them? You don't know what it's like. You don't have any experience, without ever talking to me? Is that how you want the world to work? Is that how your world works?
And so when you're not subject to some of these experiences, when you're not subject to certain behaviors, it can be very difficult to accept that it's true. And so having those conversations, right? And one of the things that we do at FIG when we're doing training is we make employees have conversations with employees. Like,
we make employees have conversations with employees. You will converse with one another. This I command.
Coworker to coworker.
Because employees never talk to each other in the first place about stuff. But you want them to talk about these things. I wonder what one of those conversations looks like.
So you understand this isn't just leadership saying that this is an initiative. This is something we need to do because it's the right thing. No, I actually want to share my experience with you so you understand how it differs from yours.
What if your experience is irrelevant to the workplace? I mean, what happening in the workplace requires me to know the deep, dark secrets of your quote-unquote experiences, or mine, or anybody else's? Whose business is it to know those things? What functional benefit is any of that knowledge to me sitting down on my computer and doing my job in the course of the workday? Right? Why does that need to be part of the quote-unquote conversation? How are you defining a diversity problem? Is it coworkers getting to know each other? Because that doesn't sound like what you're talking about. And if my quote-unquote experience is being a white, hetero, male Christian with a 4-year degree, well, what does that inform you of my experience without having to ask me anything else? Because apparently you already know something about my perspective and experience if those things are all true. And
that's essentially how you start to create inclusive culture and, more importantly, build the buy-in, which is required to reach an inclusive culture.
Okay, nothing of what you're talking about is inclusive. Everything you've talked about is exclusionary and divisive. They, us, we, them. Divisions based on race, assumptions of someone's experience, life quality, etc., defined by their skin color, their gender, their education. You know these things without having to ask any questions. You're going to make people have conversations with each other about subjects that are irrelevant to the workplace. This is inclusive? Okay.
So another reason is my personal favorite. I'm not the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So I may know that there's a problem, but it's not me. So why do I have to go through these trainings?
That is a good question. If someone's behavior is not contributing to the quote-unquote problem, of what use is it to put someone through the rigorous, shaming and blaming that I assume and have heard that DEI programs really are?
Why do I have to sign another document saying that I'm aware of our new policy? Why do I have to deal with all of this because I am not the one contributing.
Are they wrong? Do you assume that they're already wrong because they say so? There's nothing about their individual behavior or temperament that might say otherwise?
That is less common than being in the majority, but it is certainly very common.
Okay, well, all right. So you have someone who says there's not a problem, and you already know they're wrong if they're in the majority. I wonder what happens if they're not in the majority and they say that. You didn't address that contingency, but okay, I guess we're moving on. Now someone says, I'm not the problem, and they're obviously wrong because...
And here is the answer to that. This affects everyone. So,
says you.
So just because you aren't contributing to the problem intentionally does not mean that you are unintentionally contributing to this problem.
Is there a way to determine that? Can I take a test so I don't have to go through this stuff? All right, if I just come to work every day and I sit down at my computer and I do my job and I, only have such interactions with my coworkers as is necessary to do my job and don't go outside those boundaries, which is pretty much how I work, and then I go home for the day, I'm not doing anything to anybody at any time for any way. So can I just skip the DEI program and go home? Because all I want to do is come to work and do my job. Oh, but somehow I'm unintentionally contributing to it. Okay, how could I be unintentionally contributing to whatever the quote-unquote problem is?
By choosing not to participate or choosing to push back, you are in fact saying, as an employee, as a coworker, as a leader, whatever your role, you are in fact saying that this is not important.
What if it's not important? What if it actually is not important? What happens then? See, here's, and I've said this, I can't count how many times on TEDx talks and everything else. In order to have a persuasive argument, you have to at least acknowledge the other side of the complaint, the other side of the issue, right? You can't just not mention it. You can't dismiss it out of hand. You have to at least give some, even if it's only condescending, lip service to the opposite angle of what it is that you're arguing for. And if you're not willing to at least offer the possibility that someone could have a point or they could be wrong, right? Then the whole thing falls apart. It can't just be a one-sided pitch. There has to be some inclusion. You have to include other possibilities and perspectives. So this is not a persuasive argument. Just saying, I'm right, and anybody who says otherwise is obviously wrong, because refer to rule number 1.
Whether I'm contributing to this culture or not is not the point. The point is we need to do something about this now, and everyone plays a role in contributing to correcting discriminatory behavior, isolation, microaggressions, etc.
Which obviously exist, because why wouldn't they exist? I mean, I guess we have to assume then that you've gone into a company and however you do so, you would determine that there is a problem. We're not in the problem finding phase. We're in the problem exists, and now you're either going to go along or you're not. So what I'm waiting for, and like I said at the top, what I'm waiting for is to hear what should be the consequences of pushback. What should be the consequences of someone who does not want to participate? What does our speaker advise companies to do with dissent?
So for the most part, none of us necessarily like going through training. Let's just be honest. We're out of school. We probably are not excited about sitting through a training class or a webinar.
That's not what these things are. They're not training classes. They are shame and blame games. They're to presume that everybody there has some unconscious bias that is being evil and used against other people, and that everybody there, whether they want to admit it or not, is inherently racist in some way, shape, or form, or sexist, or homophobic, or transphobic, or whatever. And so we all just have to sit down. And really, by sitting down and participating, there's almost a tacit confession that the person making the accusation is correct about you. That might be where a lot of the pushback comes from. Is that if I'm sitting down to be trained how to not be a bad person, and I'm assenting to participating in this training, then I'm also assenting to your assessment of me. And then I'm already putting myself into a category of suspicion. You see how that kind of works? You know, if I go along with this training, I'm agreeing with your assessment of me out of hand. Can you at least admit, and I know she probably won't, but you never know, can you at least admit that that might be part of where the backlash, the pushback comes from? Is that you are looking for witches, and if I go along with you, then I am at least tacitly agreeing that witches exist and that I might be one?
At work. I understand that. Most of us do. That is, again, why, as a leader, you need to make it very clear to your employees, right, to your coworkers, why we need to make this investment in training. Okay,
why? What is a good argument? Right? Because apparently you've already started from the presumption that the problem exists, full stop, no question, doubt shall not be allowed. All right, so what is a good persuasive argument that a leader could make to skeptical employees that this is necessary?
Because you're not actively contributing to this behavior doesn't mean that you're equipped to address it when you see someone else acting inappropriately.
I'm not equipped. Okay, again, I have to assume then that we are starting from the point at which we already know, or we've already decided there is a problem in company X. There's no doubt about that. Any question about it is obviously wrong, I guess.
So the training has multiple functions, right? The diversity conversations have multiple purposes and reasons behind them. The diversity language conversation contributes to a much bigger picture.
Such as very, very broad concepts. Could you give us an example?
So if you are getting this response, I'm not the one contributing to this culture.
Yeah.
That's great. I appreciate that. But what I do need from you is to help make sure that everyone else is not contributing to the problem.
So you want me to be your secret police. You want me to be your tattletale or something. Is that your persuasive argument to that objection? Is that what you advise? It's like, well, I need you to do this to help me. I need you to help me find out what other people are doing. You want me to spy on and report on my coworkers. Okay.
And I need that from you because that is going to help us create XYZ. That's going to help us reach this goal.
Right. Okay. So I am there to inform on my employees if I see something that I'm told is inappropriate in order to reach this goal. So I'm not going there to be trained because I need to know what's going on. I'm going there to be trained to know what to look for in order to better tell on other people.
Right? So not immediately saying, oh, okay, whatever. Okay, I got you. You're not part of the problem. But that does not mean that you don't play a role in making sure that no one else is.
That is, okay.
Because again, diversity is everyone's responsibility. Inclusive culture takes everyone's buy-in.
Yeah, especially when you're going to diminish people and their perspectives and their value in their opinions because,
That's how this works.
Right.
The last one, and you have probably heard us talk about Bob.
What?
The last one is you feel ignored.
Bob? Okay, if this was like a video in a series that I missed, then perhaps, but I don't know. What about Bob? Which is a great movie, by the way.
Or your employees feel ignored.
Yeah.
They feel left out.
Yeah.
They don't understand why this is such a big deal. They genuinely don't understand why there's a need for diversity training. They don't understand why people of color are starting to get unfair raises or title changes, promotions, etc. They genuinely do not understand.
Well, are they getting unfair promotions and raises? Are they being promoted and given raises because of what they look like? Because, I don't know where this video is. Oh, she said Las Vegas. Okay, well, then by American law, if you don't have a better explanation as to why suddenly somebody's getting a pay raise, a promotion, etc., beyond the color of their skin, you might have a legal problem. But, okay, what do you say to someone who is just genuinely bewildered? And what happens if that someone isn't white? What happens then? Because you've already drawn a line of demarcation between valued opinions and devalued opinions based on race, primarily. What happens when someone of the non-majority has an opinion counter to the diversity, equity, and inclusion program? What do you do then? What happens to that person's opinion? Do they know something you don't then?
And feel left out. They feel ignored because now so much of the leadership's focus is on diversity that because I have white skin or because I am a hetero male, I don't matter.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I wasn't sure because I'm never 100% sure, but now we know what diversity means to our speaker. Okay, so it's not diversity of thought, it's not diversity of experience, it's not diversity of skill, it's diversity of the aesthetic. Okay, well, let's put it this way. You've already indicated that based on what someone looks like, their opinion, their perspective, their outlook on reality is irrelevant. You set that standard. So now that you have set that standard, and that you have indicated that by your own assessment, certain people's opinions and relevance to a conversation are more or less valuable based on what they look like, how are you going to walk that back on this particular point?
I don't have a place. And that is how we came up with our character, Bob. So Bob is a typical middle-aged white man. He's probably been in your company for 5+ years, does a solid job, doesn't rock the boat, and Bob doesn't really care if his coworkers are black or white, if they're male or female. Bob genuinely doesn't care.
Okay, so Bob is operating on a colorblind perspective. Right? Okay, but wait, why does the notion of Bob make you make that face? Shouldn't Bob be sort of more or less, I mean, if you take away the whole white and male part, isn't Bob's perspective kind of what we all want people to be like one to another when it comes to workplaces and society and so on? Why does the notion of Bob make you look so glum?
However, he does feel that this conversation is changing a lot. What Bob really cares about, right? What the ignored employee really cares about is change.
Well, let's take your own example for a second. If Bob truly operates in the world, not assessing people first and foremost on their skin color or their gender, and suddenly somebody comes into the company and says, hey, everybody, we're going to start assessing people on their color and or their gender. Do you think maybe Bob has a, I don't know, fundamental, principled objection to such a thing? Would Bob's pushback be illegitimate to his own worldview?
They're adverse to it. They don't necessarily like change.
Change in and of itself does not necessarily mean a positive. What kind of change? If Bob operates in a world where he is not assessing people on the color of their skin, but instead the content of their character, and you want to reverse that, his opposition to that change might be based on, I don't know, the law, or perhaps just a societal virtue that he grew up with by chance.
And they certainly don't like change when they are involved in helping make the decision to change.
What?
So when Bob comes in overnight after the killing of George Floyd.
Oh, for crying out. Are you kidding me? Okay, so Bob, who is gender and race neutral in his interactions with other people, he comes in after the killing of George Floyd. Yeah.
And leadership is now, whoa, all over diversity.
Yeah, almost like maybe they're overreacting, which obviously couldn't possibly be the case.
He doesn't understand why this is happening.
Yeah, he doesn't understand why we're suddenly going to start setting standards on the basis and quotas on the basis of things that have nothing to do with someone's workability. Yeah, he doesn't understand that. How do you address Bob's confusion over the sudden need to categorize everybody on the basis of things that he doesn't categorize people on the basis of? Again, you're setting the table. You're setting the boundaries of this conversation or this lecture, and you're already crossing back and over them again and again.
He understands that something happened on the news and that the country is in an uproar. He does not understand why we're doing this at work.
Okay, well, what would you say to Bob? What would you be saying to allay Bob's fears that in his gender and racial neutral perspective world that he was operating in yesterday, all of a sudden, those things have to be considerations in the workplace? What would you argue to Bob to convince him elsewise?
He also doesn't understand why 18 months later, 2 years later, we're still having this conversation.
Yeah, it is kind of perplexing. So what do you say to Bob?
And the reason typically for that is no one has explained to Bob or the likes of Bob why this is a big issue or focus for the company.
The likes of Bob. Oh, well, that's an interesting way of putting it. You got a little smile on your face when you said it like that. The likes of Bob. So a hardworking, dedicated employee who doesn't assess people on things outside of their skill or ability. The likes of Bob. Oh, but if we got it, there are too many Bobs in the world. What are you saying? Okay, well, all right. What do you say to Bob? What pitch do you give Bob to convince him to go along, to get along?
And so the moral of this story is buy-in.
Okay. How do you get Bob to buy in?
You have to get buy-in.
Yes.
And one of our statements, one of our taglines over at FIG is everyone needs to be sold, so sell it.
All right. Well, that's what I've been waiting for. Actually, I've been waiting to hear what the repercussions are to someone who pushes back. So far, you haven't addressed that. Like, what if somebody truly does not want to participate? But okay. The other question is, how do you sell it? So, by all means, sell me.
You have to sell DEI.
Yes.
Assuming that everyone is starting at the same point, or
no, you can't. No. You just said that no one's starting at the same point. You said that everybody is. You have stratified everyone's perspective and thoughts on reality on the basis of their skin color, so no one is starting at the same point. And if they all are starting at the same point, then there really isn't a diversity problem. Never mind.
Everyone is starting at the same point, or that they understand the reason behind the mission, the reason behind the focus, the reason behind the programs and the initiative.
Which is?
It's just simply not true. Not everyone understands.
Okay.
And that is because, to the point of equity, of acknowledging that we all have differences and we all have different needs,
No. We don't all have differences. You know what I think based on what I look like. You know that my opinion and perspective is this way based on what I look like. You know that Bob is irrelevant to the conversation because of what he is. Are you even listening to yourself? Is this how you pitch this in companies?
That also applies to making sure that your team understands the reason.
Okay.
They're not all starting at the same point.
What is the reason?
So even though we all witnessed the same video, even though we all read tons of press releases, that does not mean that Bob and I are on the same page as to why this is important to the company.
I don't know if you know this, but diversity, equity, and inclusion were initiatives going on and in place long before George Floyd. Okay, George Floyd is not the end-all, be-all of all things. So, okay, if your only argument is George Floyd, it's not a very good argument. George Floyd had nothing to do with the diversity culture in Company X a million miles away. So, how are you selling this? And if your only selling point is George Floyd, it is a weak sales pitch.
I may be privy to conversations that he hasn't been.
Maybe. Well, probably yes. In fact, I've been privy to conversations that you haven't been privy to because I'm a different person and I have a different life and I know different people, and that doesn't mean anything. Give me the sales pitch.
Or I may just have personal experiences that, like our first example, Bob can't relate to.
And maybe Bob has experiences that you can't relate to. Who is in the position of authority over something in that case? What does this have to do with selling DEI?
So feeling ignored. Have you ever seen, and yes, I am about to compare Bob to a child.
Really? Oh gosh, I couldn't. I'm absolutely shocked. I'm absolutely shocked that you would diminish someone even further than you already have, based on what they look like. But okay, I'm backing up a second. Wow me.
I am about to compare Bob to a child. Have you ever seen a 2 or 3 year old who suddenly someone else is getting more attention than they are? They don't respond well.
Oh, okay, so that's the mindset you see in Bob, your average white male hard worker, 40-something, I think it was, wasn't it? That is how you view a white male who has any kind of hesitation, question, or pushback to a DEI initiative. They are a child. They are a child who is jealous of someone else getting attention. That is your assessment. Okay.
They throw tantrums, they throw fits.
Oh.
They start crying.
Oh.
Or they pout, they get whatever it is.
Yes.
That is essentially how Bob starts to react.
Oh. Bob starts crying and throwing tantrums. That is essentially how he starts to react. I mean, that's pretty specific.
Because he doesn't feel seen.
Okay. Well, what if Bob has a point, given your own words so far? What do you do then? And why are you smiling at the notion that Bob isn't being seen? Does that give you some kind of joy? It's like, yeah, Bob's being ignored. Mm-hmm.
He does not feel heard, and no one likes to feel ignored.
But I have a feeling that you gain some kind of satisfaction out of doing the ignoring. I gotta say.
So,
a needle pulling thread.
Basically, you have to build this business case for the employees.
Uh-huh.
Right?
Right.
You actually have to sell this internally.
Yes.
Why this is important.
Yes.
Start with one of...
and by the way, these fade cuts, this is all original. I have not done anything to edit the video, just for reference. Link to the originals in the description if you'd like to check.
My most obvious reasons.
Uh-huh.
And that is, this will affect contracts. This will affect business.
How?
So if you don't have a DEI positioning statement,
Uh-huh.
if you don't have a DEI mission, if you don't have a DEI program or plan,
Mm-hmm.
and you do business with other businesses,
Yeah.
if you do business with large corporations,
Uh-huh.
that's starting to be a requirement.
Right. So it's not that we're going to initiate something in the company because there's a problem. We're not going to imply that the employees are behaving badly, are racists or sexist. We just need to have this rubber stamp on the company to make other companies feel better about themselves. So the pitch to the employees is, guys, we need to have this on the company byline so that we can do business. All right, so any kind of moral or ethical or cultural considerations are actually secondary at best next to the bottom line. So this is just a corporate virtue signal. You know what? I at least appreciate the candor.
So let's say you have a contract now in place. That does not mean that contract is guaranteed to be renewed if you cannot show what you're doing on the diversity, equity, and inclusion position.
No. You didn't say show what you're doing. Just have to have it as somewhere on the company information that you've done it. You can say that you did it. That's all that it is. Now, this is one of those instances where, the absolute truth shines through a bunch of rhetoric. She is absolutely right. That is ultimately the truth about DEI initiatives. You put your employees through this regimen of self-examination and conversations and guilt trips and blame games, because ultimately it's about having that rubber stamp on your company so that other companies can feel virtuous associating themselves with you. It's a badge of honor. It's a participation medal that you give yourself. Thank you, Zalbla. It's bullying, plain and simple. I feel this way, so now I'm going to make everyone else feel this way. Yeah. But beyond that, there is a monetary consideration to be had here. And she just said that the corporate consideration is giant companies. Like, let's say, for example, Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs made an announcement a couple of years ago. I did a video on it where they said that at a certain point, they were going to stop doing business with any companies who did not have, I think it was something like at least one woman or some percentage of women on the company's board. So if your company's board of directors did not have the amount of certain types of people that Goldman Sachs wanted, Goldman Sachs would not do business with you anymore. Okay? So that put the onus on any company that at any point in the future might want to do business with Goldman Sachs to fundamentally change the makeup, the window dressing of their board of directors in order to conform with Goldman Sachs's wishes or their attitude. It's not wrong in that it is becoming a necessity. It is a very odd necessity to economically force a company to start imposing discriminatory hiring or selection practices in their business to make other company happy. But that's what's happening. So she's not wrong. And I'm actually kind of glad that she said it this way at the top, because that was her first argument for it. Well, first and foremost, that undercuts any argument about it being for moral purposes or for equity purposes or cultural fairness or anything else. It is purely a business consideration now. It's purely a merit badge. So I'm actually kind of appreciative of that point.
This has become a major initiative for organizations and corporations. Mm-hmm. So the buy-in for your employees is that we need this. It's not only good for the culture and good for the business.
No. If it was just good for the culture of the business, there would be no monetary consideration. If this was a moral good all by itself, then you wouldn't have had to mention that other companies won't do business with us over it. Okay? That is all at best secondary and at honestly irrelevant. You just said it. You can't walk that back. I'm sorry. You can't. And it's true. I mean, it's not something you're doing. It's an absolute fact. And anybody who knows that this is a merit badge, that this is a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, we're on your side team kind of signal to other companies, knows that everything else after that is nonsense.
Our business depends on it.
Yes.
Because it will start to affect whether or not we remain competitive.
Right. It is a business decision. It is not a moral decision. That, again, I am glad she said it, because that is the truth, which again, takes the wind out of all the sails for any other argument of virtue, morality, right versus wrong, etc. It is a profit motive.
Also, access to top talent.
Oh.
Top talent now is asking for more than salaries.
You're not talking about talent. Talent is a secondary consideration in what you've just told us. The first consideration is, does this person fit the right race and or gender? Because if you're just doing it purely on talent, you're going to have to ignore race and gender. And you don't want to ignore race and gender. Those are paramount to your decision-making processes. Right?
They actually want to know that the organization, that the company that they are about to sign on to cares about this. That they have a fair shot at growing.
Fair? You want to talk about fair when you've just taken an entire demographic of potential employees, either existing or potential employees, and diminished them down to children in anything they have to say about anything that they don't like. Fair. Got it.
If not, they're out. And they will share. Why? None of us can afford that. We also have to acknowledge what we call the elephant in the room, demographic shifts.
Demographic shifts. Didn't you just address that with Bob not liking change?
These are happening whether you like it or not. These are happening whether you believe it or not. Our country continues to become more and more diverse.
And so does that throw our laws and our hopes and dreams for ourselves as a society out the window? So the country becomes more diverse, so the Civil Rights Act and equal employment opportunity laws go out the window? Those values just become irrelevant? No. What's to be irrelevant is someone's skin color, is someone's gender, is someone's religion, is someone's age, is someone's education, etc., etc. Right? Does the person have the relevant skills? I should say education. Education is, important when you're coming to a job. But anyway, for the job description, for the job requirements, do they possess the necessary skills? Can they do the things necessary to achieve the job? End of story. You want to introduce or reintroduce considerations of race, gender, and you brought up religion, which I was kind of surprised by, but race, religion, etc., into the considerations of whose opinion matters, who is a valued employee, who is a child versus not a child. You are doing that. It doesn't matter how quote unquote diverse the nation becomes. If the entire, let's say, here's a thought. Here's a thought for you. Let's say the population of the United States became 65% black, 13% white, and everything in between, a mixture of Hispanic, Asian, and so on. Okay, let's say that was the case. Would civil rights and equal employment opportunity laws be more or less relevant in that situation? This is the thing. It doesn't matter. The demographic shift of the country could go all over the place. The principles and the values in the law still matter. What you're talking about are irrelevancies against fairness. But okay, what does the demographic shift have to do with this conversation?
Meaning, over the next 20, 40, 60 years, we start seeing more of the current minority as the new majority.
And that changes what about the principles of equal opportunity?
So in less than 20 years, people that are considered minorities today will collectively make up the new majority. So for the very first time in history, whites, right, or Caucasian, become the minority. Less than 50% of this population. So this conversation matters. Getting the buy-in matters. You want to be ahead, and you also don't want to be having this conversation in 20 years.
What does it matter? If the demographic split changes as you've described, so what? What does that have to do with hiring practices? What does that have to do with promotion practices? What is that going to mean for anything? You haven't addressed what does this mean to the company and how it operates. You've alluded to a couple of things, not explained them. Why are these people getting promotions and raises out of the blue for no particular reason? You think that's any more or less fair than if it were flipped and only white people were getting promotions and raises for no reason? Do you see how the fundamental problem with advancing and elevating people on the basis of characteristics that have nothing to do with their ability is fundamentally wrong? What does the demographic shift in the country have to do with that principle?
It should be unnecessary to have conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion in 20 years. We should have this buttoned up.
Wait, are you saying we're going to eliminate racism, bias, and everything else? Okay. And you're the one telling us whose opinions matter and who are children or not? Are you the role model for the conversation we're going to be having 60 years down the line? Are you kidding me?
By then. And that does start by having these conversations with your employees and getting them on board. You also can't afford to risk an employee not being trained or not understanding enough about DEI that it affects their behavior externally.
What?
Meaning how they treat a customer or what they post on social media or what image they share or don't share, the language they use to describe a person, product, or experience.
What image they don't share? So if I decide not to do something, then... Okay, if I talk lousy to a customer, yeah, that's probably not going to look too good on me, and I'm probably going to get fired. Doesn't matter what color, back, forth, or otherwise is. If you say something sidewise to a customer that's obviously bad, you're probably in trouble. All right, well, I'm still waiting to hear what the consequences should be. Short of out-and-out firing of someone, especially if they talk dirty to a customer, which is kind of obvious, what should be the consequences for someone who's not on board?
All of that is a part of training.
Is every company supposed to be monitoring every employee's social media, external activities, things outside of work? Is that what you're advocating for? You want the company to be a mini nanny state over its employees outside of work hours? I mean, I know that a lot of companies do that now, which is crazy. Or if you happen to work for a social media company, you're kind of asking for it, I suppose. But what kind of world do you want the world to be like 60 years down the line? How do you want companies and employees to be interacting with one another? How do you want companies to be assessing employees and their place within a company? By what factors, I wonder?
So I say this.
Yes.
Diversity backlash, you should expect it.
Yeah.
Because like anything new, there's normally going to be some pushback.
Yes, because anything new is obviously good. There's no possibility that you could be wrong. There's no possibility that any complainant could be right or have a point. It's just that it's new, it's good. It's my opinion, it's the right one.
That's okay.
Yes. Is it though?
But what you absolutely must do
Mm-hmm.
is prepare the business case and understand how to handle each one of these situations, because they do require a different approach.
Except you haven't offered many approaches at all, have you? The only one you offered with any clarity was other companies won't do business with us if we don't have this on our, I don't know, bylaws or something. It is the business case, which completely removes the moral case from the argument, because it takes precedence, doesn't it? Because we're talking about businesses.
Now, if that sounds like, what?
No, you know what? It doesn't sound like what? It does sound like...
What? What is that? What the fuck is that?
It's not just a what scenario. It really isn't just a what scenario. But let's say it does sound like what.
That's okay. That's what we do at FIG.
What?
So definitely feel free to reach out. We can be reached at 1-800-834-4946. Or you can reach us at info@figfirm.com. And of course, feel free to visit our website at www.figfirm.com. Again, my name is Tashelle Lawson. I'm the president of FIG Strategy and Consulting. Please join us again next week where we discuss more diversity, equity, and inclusion and your business. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.
Man, I might have to check in on FIG again in the future. I don't know if I should be calling FIG. I mean, I'm a straight white male, and I do have a 4-year degree. I'm not Christian, but you know, we can't all be perfect, right? or immediately childish, I guess. What was that? Okay, so I mean, it's one of those sort of like good news, bad news situations. I have no doubt that our speaker said exactly what she thinks and what she feels. So I don't get any pretense on that. All her contradictions are genuine and say a lot. The one thing that I said, like I said, was I was appreciative of was at least her, her honesty and her candor in the fact that DEI is a merit badge when you're talking corporation to corporation now. It has very little to do with what the purported message or mission is, so much as it's the fad, and that companies are virtue signaling and saying, well, we are only going to deal with companies who value diversity, equity, and inclusion. And of course, the only way that you tell someone that you value it is by initiating your own program to keep up with the Joneses, basically. Which is about as cynical a thing as you can imagine when you're trying to say that, oh, but we're also doing it because of moral reasons, which is, you know, takes the back seat. So that was both informative and not informative. It was more informative about FIG, at least as a consulting firm, but it also, you know, confirmed what the trend is right now amongst major corporations and their declarations of pureness. Anyway, let's see what you guys have to say about it. If you have something you'd like to add to the conversation, put in the chat now, and I'll scroll up a bit to what other people have said. Donkey Punch Bandit. There's no moral case to be had when it's on the basis of vengeance for a century plus ago. There was a certain, like I said, at certain points, it's one of those things. I've watched enough body language analysis videos now that I'm not going to call myself any kind of expert, but maybe just sort of a rank novice, that when she's talking about some subjects and she's smiling and she's talking about other subjects and she's looking kind of grim, it kind of gives away, or at least indicates, I should say, what her real thoughts are or emotions are on certain subjects. And the demographic shift of the country, so what? What does that have to do with fairness? What does that have to do with not being discriminatory? I mean, doesn't the problem then become the majority, right? I mean, in that same scenario, what happens to the opinion of someone who is in the quote unquote majority saying the same thing that Bob was saying? I wonder what our speaker would have to say about that. Does that person's opinion then become irrelevant because they're in the majority? Or is someone's opinion still diminished because of what they look like, even if they're in the minority? I don't know. Lil Mo Zizlak, is your name Bob too? I will give this away. There is no Robert or Bob in my name. I mean, Sister Scribe has, on a few occasions, come pretty close to say my name, but yeah, no, I'll give that away. It's not Robert or Bob. Or is it? A guy in his room. Any backlash against our ideas equals racism, not valid criticism of forced insane ideas. Well, I mean, it depends on what the backlash is. It depends on what the person says. It depends on the context. What are they saying? Do they have a point? Our speaker isn't even willing to entertain the possibility that someone could have an exception to a DEI initiative and not have a point. It's just immediately wrong. And like I say, even if fundamentally she thinks any pushback is wrong, right, in her heart of hearts, she does a poor job in the diplomacy department of at least allowing that conversation, quote unquote, to happen, even if she already has a conclusion in mind. If you're going to dismiss someone's concern out of hand just because it counters your own, without at least allowing for there to be some kind of back and forth, you're not going to have a persuasive argument. You're going to come across as a dictator. That's it. That's the long and the short. And that's what she did. Let's see. Mike R. Let's see. Sales pitch, DEI, microaggressions, argumentative, non sequitur. Yeah, no, if we had a bingo card for this, if I was using the bingo card for this, we'd have a pretty full plate. But the TEDx bingo card is for TEDx's, because TEDx is a particular format. And these are all sort of wild card things. Simon Wilkins, the point of Christianity is acknowledging one's imperfections, the need for a savior. Sure. But in her case, she wanted to put Christianity as somehow a indicator of inherent fault, I guess. I don't know. Shadow Sonata. Christianity has mostly been lost to wokeness, including Catholicism, with the exception of the Eastern Russian Orthodox churches. I'll have to take your word for it. I have not done much of a look at the role of religion in current culture wars, except that certain systems of belief, let's say, are very religious in their logic. Original sin, if you are this way, like toxic masculinity, right? Being male is your original sin, and you can't wash it off, and you just have to keep asking for forgiveness for it for the rest of your life, that kind of thing. But as far as religion, I've seen some videos where you have churches promoting social justice and such, but I'm a little edgy on. Not edgy, but I'm a little hesitant to start going into. I know very little about being religious. I'll just say it there. Okay, so I'm criticizing or critiquing the obviously religious organizations and things. I'm a little not quite there, but yeah, no, but vilifying certain elements that people assume to exist within the majority. Never works out. Never really works out for you. Let's see. Bridget. I can't stand these people. My dad couldn't find a job for 2 years because of these insane regulations. He would be considered a Bob despite his adversities. Yeah, if you assume to know someone's life experience and their value on the basis of their skin color and or race and or gender, whatever, there are words for those kind of ways of thinking. And they're all bad when it comes to, deciding if someone's going to get a job or not. Spud Gun, Scribelight, I just want to work and be left alone. If I'm doing it wrong, tell me. Otherwise, fuck off and leave me alone. That is sort of my pragmatic opinion on the workplace. I come there to work, and I do my job, and I go home. There is a distinct line between my real life and my working life, and I like it that way. If you don't like it that way, if you like having a mixture of your life and work, or if your passion is your work or something like that, well, good. I mean, if that's what you want to do, and that makes you happy. But the notion that companies are effectively forcing employees to mix their real lives with their working lives beyond their own personal tolerances or comfort, that companies are imposing an atmosphere of hesitation and suspicion and, policing everybody's words or actions on the off chance they might cross a line that hasn't been clearly defined one way or the other. I don't know. That seems to me to create a more hostile work environment by default than it does to cure anything. But again, fortunately, I haven't had that direct experience. Hopefully I never will. And the day that I do, oh boy, I'm going to have some videos to put out and try to be very, very cautious with how I describe what's going on the off chance I give away where I am. Arc 210, any organization that invites these cockroaches in deserves what they get. Well, here's the thing, and this is what I was talking about. She's not wrong that it's becoming a business requirement, right? It's almost like to the point where you have to post, one of those regulations where you have to post on a tack board somewhere in the office what the workers' rights are, right? Or what the office safety regulations are. It's almost like an OSHA kind of requirement to have a DEI program associated with your business. So it is a self-generating industry in that you have these giant companies who've made these moral declarations about what is right and what is correct when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they hold the purse strings for anybody else wanting to get their business, and so they have to do it too. So a lot of companies don't have a choice. What she described is true. It is a form of corporate blackmail to bring in and establish a DEI program just to say that you did it, just to say that you have it. All right. But of course, doing so opens up a whole extra can of worms depending on what happens with your employees or how someone decides to take this situation versus that situation. Why did this person get a promotion rather than me? They look like this and I look like this. You're asking for problems, true. But I'm not sure that a lot of companies honestly have a choice anymore if they want to remain competitive. It is a very poisonous situation. And I don't necessarily hold companies to account for introducing these things because maybe they don't have a choice, or maybe they've been convinced that they're not going to be competitive without it. It's a very overused word these days, but I can't think of a better one off the top of my head. It is a very toxic environment. And it's just creating an industry that justifies itself over and over again. So, like I say, nice work if you can get it. I've done a couple of videos now on what it takes to become a DEI consultant, and it doesn't take much. But if you can do it, and you can be convincing about it, you can make a lot of money. Because companies are now desperate to be able to say that they have these things as part of their culture, their makeup, whatever. So, yeah. Let's see. And a guy in his room again. I really think a lot of people are very naive of what this stuff, to what this stuff is and what it would do to their company. Could be. I mean, I've seen a lot of videos, a lot of companies that have a lot of true believers, and it's one of those things where it's like, if someone just explained it to you, it's like, hey, shouldn't your company have a culture of fairness where everybody has a say and no one is ignored? I mean, on its face, you'd say, well, probably. I mean, nobody should feel like they don't belong there or something, right? But that's just that's just getting your foot in the door for a whole bunch of other stuff that makes things very, very complicated very quickly. And so, it's one of those things where people's hearts are in the right place and can be. The leaders involved might not entirely be thinking about the bottom line, but yeah, that doesn't seem like they assess what the consequences could be in introducing this kind of a culture, this kind of a internal police culture over everything anybody says, or inviting tokenism into your company, or especially the hiring practices. I mean, everything else aside, and she only mentioned it briefly, but how you hire people, what steps you take, what filters you're putting in place. Are those fair? Are those legal? That stuff never seems to come up all that much. And Bruce, this is all a natural consequence of capitalism. Why the need for equality? Capitalism. Why is it being subverted? Capitalism. Yeah. Again, you put the profit motive in front of it, it takes away all the moral arguments. It really does. And like I say, I at least appreciate the fact that she wasn't pretending about that part, because you rarely ever hear that from a lot of advocates for DEI. They will eventually come to that, right? But they'll start. Their first opening gambit will be, it's the right thing to do. And then maybe one or two steps afterwards will say, it also makes good business sense. That's usually the cadence and the order that I hear those arguments. It's rare to have somebody come up front and say, you're going to miss out on business. The contracts won't be there. Some businesses won't do business with you. It's rare that you hear that as the opening one. And so, like I say, I at least appreciate that. But either way, everybody, I'm going to call it here. Did we learn something? Well, we learned something about at least our speaker and her consulting business, or at least her perspective on the subject. We got an acknowledgement, like I say, at least there's a pragmatic consideration to a DEI initiative outside of just a moral one necessarily. And yeah, Johnny Hellcat, you showed up just at the end. Perfect timing. Perfect timing. I'm sorry. I start at the same time every Sunday. I don't go anywhere else. Mike R. with the Bravo Dogcat Fox. Oh, Dogcat Fox.
Wowee, wow, wow.
Oh, Dogcat Fox. Thank you, Mike R. But yes, with that, I'm going to call it here. Everybody, thank you so much for joining me on this exciting Sunday morning. I hope you all have a good rest of the Sunday ahead of you. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things. Even though everyone here is so well behaved, you have very little to do. Everybody who donated, thank you so much for your generosity, either to myself or to the GoFundMe's pinned at the top of the chat box. Please take a look at those when you have an opportunity. And yeah, programming note, there will not be a Sunday stream next weekend, as the trip to visit my folks with Sister Scribe and I had been put off, and now that is going to be this next weekend. So I will be gone. I don't know if I'll do a stream that Sunday or not. It depends on when I get back. But for all intents and purposes, I'm not going to schedule anything. So no Sunday stream next weekend. But there will be a TED Excellence this coming Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. And then Wednesday, sometime in the morning, I will be doing a review of Obi-Wan Episode 5, because I'm this far into it. Might as well go all the way into the ridiculousness of it. So look forward to that. But otherwise, everybody, again, thank you for joining me. Hope you have a good rest of your Sunday and weekend. Hope you have a good rest of your week upcoming. I hope you're all safe and well. If you are not well, please get well soon, and I will see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.